The CEO watched her lose everything until he revealed who he really was. "Mom, I'll be really quiet, I promise," Tommy whispered as Lisa Parker clutched his small hand, pushing through the glass doors of Hartwell Financial Services. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She was already 15 minutes late, and bringing her 7-year-old son to work was absolutely against company policy. But what choice did she have? As they stepped off the elevator on the 15th floor, Lisa froze. The lights were still on in several offices. She could hear voices. This had never happened before. "Remember, baby," she whispered to Tommy as they approached the cleaning supply closet. "If anyone asks, you're Lisa Parker." The sharp voice made her blood run cold. Mr. Davidson, the building's facilities manager, stood behind them with his arms crossed, his expression thunderous. Next to him stood a man Lisa didn't recognize. Tall, maybe in his 40s, wearing a simple white shirt and dark slacks. He looked tired, like he'd been working late. "You brought a child into the building?" Davidson snapped. "Do you have any idea how many regulations you're violating right now?" Tommy pressed closer to his mother's side, and Lisa instinctively moved to shield him. "Sir, I'm so sorry. My childcare fell through at the last minute." "This is completely unacceptable," Davidson interrupted. "We have liability issues, insurance concerns." "Actually," the stranger said quietly, stepping forward, "I don't mind if the boy stays." Davidson turned to him, surprised. "And you are?" "David," the man replied with a slight smile. "I'm working late myself tonight." He knelt down to Tommy's level. "What's your name, son?" "Tommy," the boy replied shyly. "Well, Tommy, sometimes work keeps us away from the people we love, doesn't it?" Something in David's voice made Lisa look at him more carefully. There was understanding there, the kind that only comes from experience. "Mr. Davidson," David said, standing back up, "perhaps we could make an exception just this once. I'll take full responsibility." Davidson looked flustered, but eventually stalked away with a warning that this could never happen again. As Lisa set Tommy up with his coloring books in a small conference room, she found herself studying this kind stranger. "Thank you so much. I don't know how to repay you." "No need," David said warmly. "What happened with your usual child care?" "Mrs. Rodriguez got food poisoning," Lisa explained, then found herself adding, "It's just me and Tommy." David nodded without judgment, and Lisa felt something she hadn't experienced in months, the relief of not being alone in a crisis. She thought it ended there, but her kindness toward her son had already caught the attention of someone who understood more than she could imagine. Over the following weeks, Lisa often saw David working late, long after everyone else had gone home. She noticed small things about him that didn't match the picture of a typical office worker. His dinner would sit untouched on his desk, cold by the time he finally remembered it. His tie was often loosened, as if he'd been wrestling with problems too heavy for neat appearances. Sometimes Tommy would wave at him on the nights Lisa had no choice but to bring her son briefly to the lobby before her shift. Once, Tommy even handed David a drawing, a crooked volcano with red crayon lava pouring down. David smiled like it was a masterpiece and pinned it to the corner of his laptop. Lisa believed these quiet talks were nothing more than passing kindness. She had no idea they were steering her life toward a future she couldn't imagine. One evening, Lisa overheard his voice through a cracked conference door. "The employee retention numbers are unacceptable. We need to start treating people like human beings instead of line items." The passion in his tone startled her. This wasn't just another worker complaining about overtime. Whoever he was, he carried authority and a conscience. When he emerged, Lisa pretended to busy herself with the trash. He caught her eye anyway. "Long night?" she asked softly. "The longest," he admitted, loosening his collar. Then, after a pause, "Sometimes the hardest decisions happen after midnight." Lisa tilted her head. "Maybe that's because the decisions that matter most aren't easy." For a moment, his tired expression cracked into a genuine smile. "You might be right about that." "That doesn't sound like much of a decision to me," Lisa said, then immediately worried she'd overstepped. "I mean, I'm sorry. It's not my place." "No, you're absolutely right," David said, his eyes lighting up. "It shouldn't be a hard choice." She had no way of knowing that these quiet conversations, these small kindnesses, were already reshaping the course of both their lives. The next week, Tommy got sick. Lisa had to choose between staying home with her feverish son and losing a day's pay she desperately needed. She chose Tommy, of course, but spent the day calculating how she'd make up the lost income. When she returned to work the following evening, David noticed immediately. "Everything okay? You seem stressed." "Tommy had a fever yesterday," Lisa explained. "Nothing serious, just one of those things." "You stayed home with him?" "Of course." The question seemed odd to her. "He's 7. I can't leave a 6-7-year-old alone." David was quiet for a moment. "That must have been a difficult choice." Lisa looked at him sharply. Most people wouldn't understand the weight of that decision. "What do you mean?" "Missing work when you need the money, but choosing your child anyway." The fact that he understood made her throat tighten unexpectedly. "How did you—" "Lucky guess," David said softly, but his eyes held secrets Lisa couldn't read. She was beginning to realize there was much more to this late-night office worker than met the eye. The following Friday, Lisa's worst fears materialized. She came home from her shift to find a final eviction notice taped to her apartment door. Bright orange paper that might as well have been a neon sign advertising her failure. 3 days. That's all she had left. She thought the worst had already happened. But the final blow, the one that would strip away the last of her security, was still waiting for her at work. Tommy was asleep on the couch, having waited up for her, despite her telling him to go to bed. At 7 years old, he already knew when something was wrong. Children of struggling parents develop that sixth sense early. They learn to read worry lines and hear the weight in their mother's sighs. Lisa sat at their tiny kitchen table, surrounded by bills she couldn't pay and job applications she'd filled out during her lunch breaks. The grocery store where she used to work had no openings. The restaurant down the street paid even less than her current job. Every door seemed to be closing just as she needed them most. She thought about calling her sister Maria in El Salvador, but what could she say? "I'm about to be homeless with your nephew." Maria had her own 3 children to worry about, her own husband who worked construction when he could find it. At 2 a.m., Lisa poured herself a cup of tea and stared out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, in offices like the one she cleaned, people were making decisions that affected lives like hers. People who went home to houses with guest bedrooms and college funds, and the luxury of never counting change for milk. But then she thought about David, working late in that conference room, looking genuinely tired and genuinely concerned about employee retention. Maybe not everyone in those offices had forgotten what it meant to struggle. She had no way of knowing that at that very moment, David was in his own home office, unable to sleep, staring at employee files and thinking about conversations with the night janitor who'd shown him more wisdom in a few weeks than his MBA had taught him in 2 years. 2 weeks later, Lisa's world collapsed. She arrived at work to find Davidson waiting with a security guard and a cardboard box. "Parker," he said coldly, "clean out your personal items. You're terminated, effective immediately." "What? Why?" Lisa's voice cracked. "I haven't brought Tommy back. I've been here every shift. Budget cuts. We're outsourcing night cleaning to a cheaper company." As Lisa mechanically placed her few belongings into the box, her mind raced. Rent was due in 3 days. The electricity was already shut off. She had enough money for groceries for maybe 4 days. The security guard escorted her to the lobby, and she sat on a bench outside, staring at the cardboard box in her lap. For the first time in years, she let herself cry. She was so lost in despair that she didn't notice the familiar figure approaching until a gentle voice said, "Lisa?" "What happened?" She looked up to see David, his face creased with concern. The story poured out: the firing, the bills, the fear of losing their apartment. David listened with the same careful attention he always showed, but Lisa noticed something different in his expression, a kind of resolve forming. "This is wrong," he said quietly. "You're the hardest worker I've ever seen." "It doesn't matter now," Lisa whispered. "I need to find something else fast." David was silent for a long moment, studying her face as though he were balancing something fragile in his mind. His expression shifted, no longer just concern, but resolve. Finally, he drew in a long breath. "Lisa, there's something I haven't told you. Something I should have said weeks ago." She blinked at him, exhausted and confused. "What do you mean?" Lisa froze when the stranger who had defended her stepped forward. He extended his hand, his expression steady but kind. "I should probably introduce myself properly," he said. "My name is David Hartwell." Her stomach dropped. That name was everywhere, on the buildings she cleaned, on the paychecks she cashed. David's voice softened. "I'm not just another employee here. I'm the CEO of Hartwell Financial Services, and I was that little boy once, the one hiding under a desk while my mother prayed no one would notice. That's why I stayed. That's why I saw you. And that's why I can't let what happened to you end here." Lisa's breath caught. The kind man who'd listened to her, who'd smiled at Tommy's crayon drawing, who'd spoken about missing bedtime stories with his own daughter. This was the man at the top. Her entire world tilted. The stranger she thought she'd met by chance was the one with the power to change everything. Lisa blinked, looking from David's familiar face to the corporate logo gleaming above the building's entrance. "I don't understand." "I've been working late these past few months because we're restructuring. I wanted to see how this company really operates, including the night shift." His voice grew softer. "I've been watching, Lisa. Really watching. You're the CEO?" The words felt impossible in her mouth. "But you talk to me like a person?" David's smile was sad. "That's exactly the problem. Do you know what I noticed during those late nights?" She shook her head, still reeling. "I noticed that your section was always perfect. Not just clean, immaculate. I noticed you stayed late on your own time to make sure everything was done right. Even dealing with your own struggles, you never let it affect your work." Lisa felt dizzy. All those conversations, all those moments when she'd opened up to him. "But more than that," David continued, "I noticed your heart. The way you chose Tommy over money when he was sick. The way you helped me think about my own daughter. That night you told me, Sarah knows I love her. You helped me remember what really matters. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. This company has a problem, Lisa. We've forgotten that we serve families. We need someone who understands that from lived experience, someone who's never forgotten what struggle looks like. With trembling hands, Lisa opened the envelope. Inside was a job offer, Director of Family Services at Hartwell Financial, with a salary that was 4 times what she'd been making. I don't have a degree, she whispered. I don't have experience. You have something better, David interrupted. You understand what it means to choose love over money, to fight for your family no matter the cost. His voice grew quieter, more personal. You see, I was Tommy once. My mother cleaned offices at night while I slept in break rooms. I remember the shame, thinking we were less because we had less. Lisa's breath caught. When my mother's boss found out, she was fired. I was 8, and I watched her cry in a parking lot, holding a box just like you are now. The pieces clicked into place. His immediate understanding that first night, his connection with Tommy, his questions about her choices. I swore if I ever had power to change things, I would. He gestured to the letter. This position involves creating support systems for working families, childcare assistance, emergency funds, flexible scheduling, things that could have saved my mother years of struggle. Lisa stared at the letter, then at David, then at the building where she'd cleaned floors just hours ago. This is really happening? As real as a mother's love for her son, David said. There's just one condition. Lisa's heart stopped. What? Tommy has to meet my daughter, Sarah, next week. She's been asking about the boy with the science project ever since I told her about him. For the first time in months, Lisa laughed, really laughed. Over the next year, Lisa threw herself into the opportunity David had given her. She spent her evenings poring over spreadsheets, taking free online courses, and shadowing department managers. There were nights she came home so exhausted she could barely tuck Tommy into bed. But she kept going, determined to prove she belonged. David mentored her personally, guiding her through the steep learning curve of finance and operations. Slowly, Lisa's natural empathy and grit began to shine through. She wasn't just learning systems. She was finding ways to shape them to better serve families like hers. A year later, Lisa stood at the head of a new initiative, the Hartwell Family Support Program, a department dedicated to helping employees with children balance work and life. For the first time, she felt the security of a steady income, the pride of meaningful work, and the joy of knowing her struggles were now helping others find hope. The program had already helped 43 employees facing childcare crises, medical emergencies, and housing issues. Tommy burst through her door, backpack flying. Mom, Sarah's dad is taking us to the robotics exhibit this weekend. Through her window, Lisa could see families in the park across the street, parents and children together in the golden afternoon light. One moment of kindness created a ripple that changed everything. That night, when Lisa chose compassion over convenience, when David chose to see the person behind the uniform, they set something in motion that would touch dozens of lives. Because the most powerful force in the world isn't wealth or position. It's one person recognizing another's struggle and saying, "You're not alone." And maybe the stranger you help could turn out to be the one with the power to transform your world. Sometimes the most unexpected encounters lead to the most beautiful transformations. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your own moments of unexpected kindness in the comments below. Join us for more soulful stories that remind us there's still magic in this world.